Hello, everyone.
Hi, Susan.
For those of you who are just entering, we're on standard Zoom. So if you want to turn on your video, by all means, please do. It's very awesome to actually see people at these events. Let's see, I'm admitting some people in. We're gonna start in a few minutes, so get comfortable.
Hi, Mark Perry. Hi, June, Saffron, and Susan Carter. Hi, Robert Meissen. Paul, I see Paul Sugarman. Rachel Myro. Rachel Myra, I don't see you, but I see your background. You're waving.
All right, I think I'm gonna start talking here because I have a lot to say before we
talk some more, right?
Yeah, before we talk some more. It's a night of talking. Let's see, make sure if I have the right speech up here. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Miles Glancy. I'm the General Manager of Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra and Chorale. I'd like to welcome all of our friends of Philharmonia to our next installment of Jews and Music Online with scholar in residence Francesco Spagnuolo. Before we begin, I'd like everyone to know, if they haven't already noticed, that we're using the standard Zoom platform this evening, which is a bit different from the Zoom webinar platform that we've used for these types of events in the past. Just like with Zoom webinar, your microphone is currently disabled, but you do have the option to share your video if you'd like. I know, especially with all of these virtual events, it's nice to actually see everyone in the audience, which is a rarity these days. So we're giving you that option to show yourself and to see any of your friends that might be here. Because you will theoretically have more little faces taking up your screen than with a webinar, in order for you to always see who's speaking, which will most often be our honorary scholar in residence for this evening, I encourage you to make sure your view settings are on speaker mode. So if you see my face taking up most of your screen with other smaller faces on a side frame, you're in the right setting, so congratulations. If you see a lot of equal-sized faces or are having trouble seeing me right now, if you're using a computer, you can go to the top right-hand corner. I think it says View, and just make sure Speaker or Speaker mode is selected once we begin. That'll make sure that whoever is speaking is spotlit on your screen. At the end of this presentation, we'll open the floor to questions. There are two ways you can pose questions to Francesco, one of which is using the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen if you're using a computer. It's also in the More menu if you're using a tablet or a phone. You may also use the raise hand feature at the end if you actually want to ask a question live to Francesco. I'll explain how to do that later on once Francesco's done. As always, if you have any issues, you can email info@philharmonia.org. Naren is staffing the email, so if you have any questions, please feel free to email that, or you can use the chat feature and message the host. A final note that this event is being recorded, and you should have received a disclaimer upon your entry into the room. I would now like to introduce PBO's Executive Director, who you have seen already, Courtney Beck.
Wow, this is really something. We were saying just seconds before we came online, we've actually produced more than 50 events since July, and this is the very first time we've been on Zoom standard. So it's pretty overwhelming and amazing to be able to see so many of you I haven't seen for almost 8 months now. Some of you I've seen. I see we have some of our board members here. I see Paul Sugarman, I see Mark Perry, and it's great to have you. It's also amazing to see how many people are here tonight. So wonderful crowd. And I'm going to start by thanking our sponsors first. 5 years running, Jews in Music has been a great success, but shifting to a virtual platform took resources, and it really took a leap of faith to make it work. So our JAMOnline digital programs have exceeded all expectations, and I want to thank our lead sponsor, the Correct Foundation, for understanding what it takes to make this kind of transition, and even more importantly, for providing us with the resources to create concerts, seminars, and dialogues that'll become a part of a permanent body of work that we can share with audiences long after this whole pandemic is over. I also want to thank the Rossi Armstrong and Jonas J.K. Stern Jews in Music Fund, the Gaia Fund, the Marmor Foundation, thank you so much, Mike and Jane, the Bernard Osher Foundation, and the Bloom Music Foundation. Some of you have attended our Jews in Music programs before, and I'm sorry if some of this is repetitive, but for those who haven't, Jews in Music really began as a way to understand the relationships between Jews and non-Jews and the rich tradition in the creation of music and art and literature, and the social and political milieus that influenced and continue to influence composition, literature, visual art, and performance. JAM covers the past, present, and future from the 17th century to the present. And if you want more information on Jews in Music, please do visit our website. There's a lot there, or reach out to me. Tonight, PBO Jews in Music Scholar in Residence, Francesco Spagnolo, is flying solo in this wonderful presentation you're about to see. Francesco has been at the center of our JAM program since the beginning, and he has helped to shape far-reaching and probing content without borders. He's been involved in every JAM program, including all of our tours to Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, and Dartmouth, and our upcoming tour to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in September of 2020. He's a multidisciplinary scholar focusing on Jewish studies, music, and digital media. And at UC Berkeley, he's the curator of the Magnus Collection of Jewish Art and Life. Dr. Spagnolo is also host for the cultural programs of Italian National Radio in Rome. He's an extraordinary individual, academic, incredible scholar, and he has really brought Jews in Music to a whole new level. Philharmonia is the only major American orchestra with a dedicated program focused on this unique range of topics. And I will ask you tonight to consider making a gift in support of Philharmonia, not just Jews in Music, but everything that we do. We want to remain strong, we want to remain innovative, and we need your support now more than ever. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Francesco Spagnolo, Jewish Nightlife, Hebrew Poetry, Kabbalah, Music, and Coffee. Enjoy.
Thank you very, very much. The rules of engagement have been pretty much explained, but just to, and the old adage of, before I start speaking, let me say a few words. We've been presenting already since the summer all kinds of formats for Jews in Music. And as we were planning things, I was asked to actually, as Courtney just said, go solo, fly solo, and also give a few lecture presentations in which I share ideas and materials. We actually started with a shared program with Richard Egger and started diving into, basically we're using this format of kind of a seminar to dive into what's behind the performances that we've been creating and that we hope to present soon again live with Philharmonia Baroque. So I feel a little naked too, because usually I'm on stage with performers and I do speak, but music comes first. Let me see if I can maintain that promise somehow. I prepared a rich menu. Last time we were in a seminar format, we went deep into the relationship between text and music. This time, I thought it would be good to start thinking about context, and the context for the development of the synagogue as a public stage for musical performance in the early modern period is a context that's focused in our programming very much on Italy, but in reality is much broader than that. And it's not just European, it's absolutely Mediterranean. So I'm gonna go back and forth in time and space and crossing many different sounds to sort of help you understand how we're thinking about the whole project and where we would like to take it in the future. In order to do this, of course, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully the correct screen so you see my actual presentation. And here we go. Jewish Nightlife, Hebrew Poetry, Kabbalah, Music, and Coffee. I have my coffee next to me, and I already started drinking a little bit of it. But this program starts really trying to compare things that are usually not put next to one another. So let's go into it. How can we compare sounds like the ones we have on the screen in front of us. It's both music designed for nighttime, but the sounds are very different, and yet the connection is there. And the connection is really the conquest of the night as a time of cultural, artistic encounter among people. Boccherini, la musica notturna delle strade di Madrid, the Minuetto dei Ciechi. I get to show off my native Italian in these cases, so forgive me if I do that. But what's interesting about this minuet is that in this series of pictures that depict music heard at night in the streets of Madrid, is that it's followed by the liturgy of the hours. So the rosary is recited at the end of the minuet. So we'll just catch a little snippet of that. And if we continue exploring our soundscape tonight, we see that in an entirely different, but not geographically very distant area, and around the same time, night musical repertoires were being developed. Let's see if we can, in the course of the hour we have together tonight, build a link between what we just heard and what we are about to hear. And of course, provided that I can click on the right button. So if in one case we heard the sounds of the church entering the sounds of the street, in this case we hear the sounds of the street entering the space of the synagogue. From Spain to Morocco, we'll be traveling back to Italy, across the Mediterranean, Turkey, North Africa, Syria, and then back to Italy and to the Italian ghetto to really understand what informed its sounds starting about 500 years ago. Might be a silly question, but it's not silly at all. Why is Jewish nightlife different from all other nightlives? And The reason for that is that to bring the sounds from the street into the synagogue and to create new repertoires, a lot of different elements needed to be put in place. First of all, until the early modern period, nighttime was essentially either the time of the church, the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, or a time for lowlives, thieves, prostitutes, and in their own homes and a little bit in their secluded synagogues, a time for Jews who started early on to have night rituals, but only in the modern period really started developing them in a way that kind of benefited society at large. With Philharmonia Baroque, we've been performing and exploring the repertoires created, especially in the Venice ghetto, but in other ghettos in northern Italy, starting in the early 1600s and continuing into the 18th and early 19th centuries. When we listened, and we're going to listen to a night prayer set to music by Salomone Rossi performed. This was a performance at Yale University by PBO. Nick McGeegan is conducting. When we hear this prayer, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind, but let's first listen to it for a second. And again, if I can click right and unmute for some reason. This was the fabulous Voxtet of Yale School of Sacred Music. We were pretty much all together at that time, those of us at PBO that are here tonight. So it brings back memories as well. It was a magical performance. But when we listen to this music, we actually need to really tune in beyond the sounds of the synagogue, beyond the walls of the synagogue, beyond the walls of the ghetto, and in this case, into many soundscapes, and the many soundscapes that eventually make their way back into the synagogue. So we have to listen widely and think especially about nighttime. Nighttime is a time of encounter. I've told the various PBO performances how I traced nighttime in the ghetto as a time in which Jews would sneak out of the ghetto and go to the opera, while non-Jews would sneak into the ghetto to go and listen to music in the synagogue. But it was also a time of encounter. Always in my mind, I thought that these two flows would meet on the bridges of that lead into the Venice ghetto and sort of exchange ideas and maybe at the end of a performance mutually and kind of share thoughts about what they heard. So let's really focus on this and think about the fact that nighttime is co-essential to Jewish ritual and to the way in which Jews measure time. The night begins the day. At the beginning of the Sabbath, the verses from Genesis 2 and all the verses from Genesis that remind us that the days start with the night, as in this translation, it was evening and it was morning. The next day is announced. Let's hear the sounds of the synagogue from Turkey, but it was an Italian synagogue in Turkey, in Istanbul, by the great cantor Isaac Al-Ghazi, who was born in Turkey, ended his life in Montevideo, Uruguay. And again, to think about the globality of the sounds that we have to elicit in order to really tune in and understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the early period of Jewish music in the Italian ghettos.
No!
Cantor Al-Ghazi behind briefly because the sounds of the Turkish synagogue will come back into Venice later on in our conversation, to also remind ourselves of other important moments of Jewish nightlife. Probably the foundational one is the Passover Seder, which is actually a subversive ritual. And in a way, it's the template of the nighttime, Jewish nighttime as a subversive time. The Passover Seder is created by rabbis, so it's rabbinical nighttime nightlife. It's created by rabbis as a response to the Roman invasion and occupation of ancient Palestine, and the night is marked in all kinds of ways, including especially the celebrated 4 questions that children are invited to recite at the beginning of the narrative. The narrative is the narrative of the Exodus from Egypt, but it's a narrative of subversive liberation. And so just to be a little subversive with Philharmonia Barocca, I decided to offer a hip hop version of the 4 questions. This is DJ So Called, aka Josh Dolgan, an incredible hip hop artist, musician, and magician from Montreal, Canada. Here are the 4 questions in a let's say not exactly traditional version. And again, sorry for that.
Never had a problem with that.
Daddy?
What is it, my child?
Daddy, what's going on here? Why is everybody singing? And how come the table is set with matzah instead of bread?
Well, you see.
Daddy?
Uh-huh.
Why is this night different from all other nights? Why?
Hang on here and we'll count to 4.
And the Passover Seder in reality continues to be subversive because it is a text, it's an open text, it's an open source text, it's not a closed text, it's text that can be added to continuously and has been added to over time. There are songs in it, and of course it's a place of boundless musical creativity, but it's a subversiveness that's very much secluded within the confines of the Jewish home. What we see with the confluence of the rise of nightlife, which coincides in the early modern period, and all happens in this little around this little red square in the ghetto of Venice, is the arrival of Jewish mysticism. We actually know pretty much the year. It's 1570. Disciples of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero from Sfat, from Safed in the Galilee, arrived to Venice, and they established a new synagogue. They arrived to a ghetto that had been in place for not even a century, and where there were already 2 Ashkenazi synagogues, 2 Sephardic synagogues, and they insert a new synagogue with the Kabbalistic rituals that they bring from Galilee, from Safed. And what do they call it? They call it the Italian synagogue. They're not necessarily Italian Jews. They just, needed a label that wasn't really taken until then. And so they use the ritual of Italian Jews to insert all kinds of new texts and new ideas in the liturgy. But especially they arrive, and with the aid of coffee that has been circulating, it arrives to Venice around the same time. They start creating rituals that begin at midnight, at a time that no one else was meeting. So it was a new endeavor. Here's the place. And by the way, the editor, the person who masterminded the composition and publication of Salomone Rossi's Hebrew songs was Leone Modena, who had only once, he was a kind of an interesting character. He was a rabbi, he was a poet, a musician, also a compulsive gambler, and only held to one job in his whole life, and that was as the cantor of the Italian synagogue, meaning the Kabbalistic synagogue inside the ghetto of Venice. So this was the kind of the central, from where coffee drinking, Kabbalistic rituals, and the nighttime as a time to involve others into the production of culture all took place. But it spread and connected Jews from all corners of the Jewish world, and which at the time was especially a world that crossed over the divide between Christianity and Islam. One of the great innovations of the Kabbalists was to introduce a new ritual called Kabbalah Shabbat. The word Kabbalah is chosen with a very, very specific meaning. It's not just the reception of the Sabbath, but it's really something that has to do with Kabbalah as a mystical current. So Kabbalah Shabbat is a new service that precedes the eve of the Sabbath on Friday night, and new poetry is inserted. The poetry all has mystical symbolism, and this is a version of music that has traveled around from Italy and northern Italy and Venice across Sephardic communities, and it was transcribed and recomposed by an Ashkenazi cantor who was actually a cantor of the Sephardic Turkish synagogue in Vienna. So you see that mingling is essential to what I'm discussing. The performance was presented at Ohio State about 15 years ago, and it's the only really available performance of this music which exists in manuscript. So let's just hear a little bit of the poem Lecha Dodi, which introduces the Kabbalah ritual, the Kabbalah Shabbat ritual, which was really the staple of the innovation and the claiming of nighttime as a time of musical innovation. And creativity around Kabbalah Shabbat continued and continues to this day. This is one of my favorite examples, just to show you that I'm not staying only with Italy, but this is probably also an example influenced by Middle Eastern music in all kinds of ways. Great rendition of a text from the Zohar, so a Kabbalistic mystical text from the Zohar that was inserted into the Kabbalah Shabbat prayers by East European Jews. It's a text that it's so self-explanatory that it's impossible to understanding. The secret of the Sabbath is Sabbath itself. That's what he recites. The rendition by Cantor Pierre Pinchek, who was born either in 1893 or 1897 or 1900, who knows? This rendition is a standard, and it's a magical sound, just to give you a sense of how boundless the creativity around the night that begins the day is in Jewish tradition.
Leyelu lo yusimar kurisa yudikore Adi savidas beruzu de echot ki gavnu dile Lemeve echot beyechot لما بياخد بيهيخد زيو وكيمنو روزو دادو يشم اخود وشماي اخود روزي شعبو روزو شعبو شعبو
And I'm going to stop here because this is a long piece. It was recorded on two sides of a 78 RPM recording, and it was probably much longer in real life. It starts low and soft and unassuming, like a lot of Middle Eastern music starts, and then explodes in all kinds of tones and overtones. And one could start imagining it as also performed by countertenors and singers that are very much in the lines of what Philharmonia Baroque has been doing. But going back to the repertoires of Italy, so what happens with the arrival of coffee is that there is actually a divide within the Jewish community. We could call them the midnight Jews, the ones who drink coffee after dinner and are all perked up and are able to show up at synagogue at midnight, and the ones who instead drink coffee before dawn, the dawn Jews. And it will take some time for the two constituencies to find a balance between one another. So we can also imagine different night times, different times of the night with different social constituencies and different groups. We do have a Hebrew cantata was commissioned most likely by a confraternity. The confraternity was called Shomrim Laboker, the custodians of the dawn. So these were dawn Jews, so early morning coffee drinkers, who commissioned a non-Jewish composer, Carlo Grossi, to write for them. But what we hear in this cantata, so we're in the late 1600s, is actually kind of a documentary of nightlife. The recitative is an individual, the singer who sings the recitative is an individual who walks down the streets of the ghetto at night and is surprised to see a group of people singing. And then the chorus comes in and explains what they're doing. We're actually the crazy people who wake up before dawn to sing all these odes to God on another Kabbalistic occasions, the festival of Hoshana Rabbah. Let's hear a little bit of this. The recording is the first real recording of this music. It was produced by Israel Adler, the musicologist who edited the manuscript into a modern score. It probably begs a new recording. So maybe as a little, checklist to-do item for BDO, we can think about this in the future. Let's hear it. really the recitative, the person singing is asking why are you doing this? And they explain who they are, what they're after, what they're trying to do, how they're innovating things, and they use all kinds of Kabbalistic terminology in the lyrics of their choruses. So it's a dialogue that's really a documentary, a sound documentary into time and space. But it's not the only one. Just a couple decades later, in the Jewish community of Casale Monferrato, a series of Hebrew cantatas will be produced year after year. The three that we know are from 1732, 33, and 35. The distinction of this, I'm not going to play it, but the distinction of these is actually they include also symphonies, instrumental pieces at the beginning. And some of these were collated from the symphonies that were invented at that very same time. The birth of the symphony, especially in Northern Italy in the 17 teens and 20s, the roaring 20s, so among them is actually the earliest known manuscript of a symphony by Antonio Brioschi. Just a little tiny snippet, I can't resist. Etc., etc. But the etc. is really exciting and hopefully to be pursued in further research in this series. There is more. So if the symphony enters the walls of the synagogue as a secular bourgeois repertoire, also folk repertoires from Italy enter into the Jewish nightlife. This is a quick example of a night ritual that still exists in Rome, in the Roman Jewish community. And the melodies were really imported from folk religious repertoires of the Catholic confraternities of the time. So we see religious music that crosses out of the church into the street, from the street into the synagogue. Let's hear. The first is a traditional performance, and then of a Hebrew song, and then a comparable melody sung in Italian, in Central Italian dialect. So one is an ode to the legendary author of the Sefer HaZohar, the key text of Kabbalah, and the other is an ode to Saint Anthony, in Italian, Sant'Antonio.
Bar Yochai nimshach tashrecha shemen sason mecha berecha. Bar Yochai shemen mishkat kodesh nimshach tamimidad kodesh. Nazada tzitzne zera kodesh.
Avo shaloshecha pe'arecha bar Yochai nimshach tashrecha shemen sason mecha berecha.
And here is the Catholic version of the same melody.
Sant'Antonio, Sant'Antonio. Buonasera cari amici, tutte quante cristiane. Questa sera vaggi a dici della festa da dimane. Che dimane Sant'Antonio l'unni c'è dillo dimonie coro. Sant'Antonio, Sant'Antonio l'unni c'è dillo dimonie.
And well, there would be a lot more to say about this, but speaking of documentaries, this is a documentary of another night ritual, the bakkashot of the Syrian community. This was recorded outside and inside the Ades synagogue in Jerusalem in the 1970s, founded by chance on YouTube in the midst of an ad for Passover matzah. And it shows people seeing the announcement of who will be performing at the synagogue at night. These are people who wake up, go have dinner, go to take a nap, and wake up before midnight and meet at the synagogue and sing until dawn. So these are midnight to dawn Jews. And it's a type of ritual that we find in Syria, in Turkey, in Morocco, and that very much inspired a lot what was going on in the synagogues in Italy at that time. The music is different, but the concept is the same. So we see people walking and sitting and singing. And again, sorry for this.
Shabbat Shalom.
From a rhetorical point of view, the recitative and chorus that we heard before, so the documentarian and the chorus that explains what's going on really, is very similar to what we just watched. And that happens every Friday night in the winter time in many synagogues, in Moroccan and Syrian synagogues. Here is an example of a Moroccan repertoire of the same type of ritual.
الحي عصاي وتحزني أخمي قرشاي حيشت لنا حلق بدوي وقمنا حلا بذن يشان لداوي شيرو مزمار بتوف او بمسيل تايم يسوداتو على هرمار تبي يروشالايم ديرت قدش نفح
etc., 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 and etc. because there is more, meaning that there are similar repertoires. This is the repertoire. This is how it's another nighttime repertoire from Turkey that I'm presenting and about to introduce. In this case, the music of the Ottoman court enters the synagogue, and here is a short example.
חדש כקדם ימינו סוכן זבולאי חדש כקדם ימינו סוכן זבולאי לשכון כבוד בארצנו נבטלה לשכון כבוד בארצנו נבטלה.
These types of nighttime gatherings to sing Hebrew poetry can acquire pretty large dimensions. This not these days with the pandemic, but this is a video recording from a few years ago. The nighttime selichot in front of the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Again, mystical Hebrew poetry in the service of a gathering of people together at night to sing. And almost. So when we come back to our dear repertoires that we're studying, developing, investigating, that we're discussing to each letter and syllable in order to really explore how they were performed, we really have to keep all of this in mind. And it's not just an exercise, it's more than that. What I'm about to play is a video again from the PBO concert at Yale University a few years back. Sherazad Pantaki is presenting one of the psalms so-called psalms that Benedetto Marcello transcribed in a synagogue, one of the Spanish, meaning one of the Sephardic synagogues in Venice in the early 1700s, and then he used to compose his own music. Now, the poem itself, Shara Shert Niskar, that we'll hear Sherry sing, is a poem that's included exactly in the night rituals that I discussed. And the music that Marcello transcribed is probably the only piece in the 11 ones that he transcribed and composed new music upon that is in what we call flowing rhythm. It's really a sign of essentially a sign of Arabic music brought from Middle Eastern rabbis and cantors into the ghetto of Venice and recorded through transcription by an Italian composer in the early 18th century, and turned into what today we hear as Baroque. But it's not just Baroque. It's Baroque as in it's a Baroque plus. It's a Baroque that encompasses the sounds of the Mediterranean and even more the sounds, as we heard, of the street, of the Catholic Church, of the mosque, of the coffee house. All of this is included in what we're studying, we're researching, and presenting to you in this series. Let's hear Sherazad Pantaki for a second. with this, I am pretty much closing my presentation, hoping that I provided you with a slightly broader soundscape, and also the idea that we may have to tune into the sounds of the present, even hip hop, in order to go back in time and hear the sounds of the past and feel like we're there. And it's sort of, I think for me, and I hope for you at home, it's kind of magical to see PBO perform, in this case with students at Yale University, creating new sounds and rediscovering ancient ones. So thank you for your attention. I think it's now time to say thank you again to our sponsors, and also open the floor for anyone that has any remarks, questions. And I don't play the piano, but you can shoot the piano player, of course.
Wow, Francesco.
Yes, oh my goodness. And shout out to a very, or a younger, I should say, Jimmy Reese, who many of you know, who duetted alongside Sherry. That was when he was a student at Yale, and he has been a soloist for us a few times. So many of you saw him just in February, our last concert set. Francesco, if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen.
I will unshare.
So you can feel free to, there are several ways that you can engage in a question if you have it, or just a comment. You can certainly type it in the chat. You can also, if you do know how to raise your hand using the raise hand feature on Zoom, it's fairly simple. I think if you click participants, and then there should be a right frame that enters on your computer, and then you can raise your hand. It says raise hand button, or, you know, I can see most of you now. So if you just want to wave spastically, if you have a question for Francesco, or just a comment, we'd love to hear from you. So I'll open the floor to anyone who has anything to say. Francesco, I certainly have to say that this presentation has given me energy to be maybe a midnight to dawn person tonight. And I certainly have the playlist to survive the evening. And actually, this presentation, you've curated such a fantastic mix of similar yet different all celebratory music. So I think what we'll do is we'll, with sending out the recording to you all, we'll send out a link to the slideshow so you all can take a listen to all of this wonderful music that Francesco has provided us.
With great pleasure.
Exactly. I also want to encourage you, if you do have any questions, but you're too shy to ask either in the chat or by raising your hand, please do send your questions to us, because we'd love to send these on to Francesco, who has nothing better to do with his time except teach all day and work with Philharmonia at night. But I know that he'd love to answer your questions, and I've actually received a number after some of these programs. So please do feel free to be in touch with us. Oh, there's a question. I see it.
Has to unmute herself.
Yeah, so Susan, I'm gonna unmute you.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yes, we had the joy of singing the Rossi and the music of Grossi with the San Francisco Renaissance Voices. Mm-hmm. And the music is, I think, 8 and 10 parts contrapuntal, absolutely magnificent, beautiful. What a pleasure to hear this presentation. Mille grazie.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
Miles, I see a question from Tom Lee in the chat.
Okay.
Oh yes, I can read it, so I can spare you, Miles. And,
Great.
There are a few questions coming in. Were the nighttime coffee drinkers and singers mainly Sephardim, or were Ashkenazim also among them? So, well, something that's actually very interesting about Kabbalah at this time is that it kind of offers a way to reaggregate across other cultural and social divides. It's almost like in this context, I'm talking in the liturgical context. So the Kabbalah applied to liturgy is a way for people of different cultures to kind of come together. So for example, we heard the music from Modena, an Italian community, and then other cantatas that were done for Shana Rabbah by an Ashkenazi community in Casale Monferrato. So it really cuts across other divides, and in a way, the Italian synagogue of the ghetto in Venice was designed to do that. They were the new kids on the block who had arrived from Galilee, from Safed, with this innovative set of rituals and practices that were very much seemingly enhanced by the use of coffee. Even though the coffee houses will open a little later, but people got the buzz and the ability to congregate and spend time together at night. And we see that nighttime became nighttime in the synagogue became appealing to non-Jews as well. So we see non-Jews going to synagogue to listen to this music. And to piggyback on what Susan said about the music of Salomone Rossi, we can really think that that was music designed for, let's say, what today we would call an interfaith kind of audience that was able to congregate in the synagogue, overcoming barriers. It was not easy to do that, but we know a few things about things not being easy these days too, so maybe we can relate. There was another question about whether the libretto were in Italian and Hebrew. Well, the librettos were in Hebrew, and some of them had Italian translations, which I believe were very much designed for the non-Jews who were in the audiences. An example, we have the whole, like the score of the full musical ceremony, which was also Kabbalah inspired ceremony, which also happened at nighttime in Siena for the inauguration of the Synagogue of Siena, which was the merger of Italian and Sephardic synagogues that pre-existed in the ghetto in late 1700s. And all the texts were also translated into Italian. And we know that non-Jews were coming to attend the ceremony, which lasted about a week. So it was a week of nightly celebrations at that time. I'm still here and still awake if you have questions, and otherwise we can, I think we crossed the hour, so we completed our tour. I've loved in the past giving these types of presentations at midnight in the Bay Area, especially in the East Bay. But elsewhere too, there are occasions for a variety of communities and Jewish communities to congregate, especially the night before the night of the festival of Shavuot. It's a night-long event of lectures and studies, and I've enjoyed discussing the origins of Jewish midnight, the musical origins of Jewish nightlife and at midnight.
Wow.
So maybe we can, that's something else that we can think about when we'll go wild once this insanity is over and we can congregate again.
I think it's a great idea. And Francesco, do you want to give us a little teaser about what's coming up?
This Sunday we are meeting with, so I'll be in conversation with the composer Yotam Haber, who is Israeli-Dutch, grew up in Africa and then United States, but from the point of view of compositional schooling is very much an American composer. He's a professor of composition in Kansas City, and he's been for, I would say, a good, I think he contacted me the first time was 2007. He was spending a year at the American Academy in Rome, and he stumbled upon recordings like the ones that I played for you earlier of Italian cantors, archival recordings, and he started a whole series of compositions based on this music, including inspired by what he calls ghetto sounds and so on. So we'll be exploring this music through the eyes of a living, young, vibrant composer who otherwise is occupied with Philip Glass and the legacy of minimalism, but in this case is really somehow activated by these repertoires. So we'll do that on Sunday. What's the time, Miles? You can help me I think
it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's 11 o'clock, and it's on the members lounge for those of you who are 2020 virtual.
And I'll be giving a couple more of these type of seminars, so I can, you know, fill your ears with more ideas and more sounds. One will be also connect in a way, kind of a sequel to the relationship with coffee, but will be one on Jewish songs about food. The week of Thanksgiving, we thought it would be fun, but it's actually really about identity and mingled identities in a way, and problems with identity. And the songs are kind of fun in various languages. And then I'll go deeper into the ghettos and how they functioned musically and otherwise. And I think we're ending around Christmas, Hanukkah with Hanukkah in Venice. So let's see what happens then.
Thank you so much, Francesco. This has been a real treat. And I have to say, it's just been an absolute joy to see all of you. I think this was a great success doing it on the standard Zoom platform. And it's been really, really fun just to say hello and to wave after all this time. So I think this is a winning recipe, and we'll try to do more on the Zoom standard platform, if for no other reason than just to say hello. And the great bonus, of course, is Francesco and all that you bring to Philharmonia. We're so incredibly grateful, and thank you everyone for your tremendous support. We couldn't do it without you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful evening. So thank you. We'll see you on Sunday, I hope. 11 a.m. Right, Miles?
That's right. Francesco, what an incredible way to start our day, right?
Absolutely. The day just began.
Yes. All right.
Bravo.
Take care all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.